Well, hi everyone. Welcome. Thank you for the Angelbeat team for having me. I'll try to make this as informative and helpful as possible. I've got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. There we go. A little bit about me. I'll save you a bunch of the reading, but I'm available on LinkedIn. I've been doing this for a while. I've seen a lot of the progression. I come from the customer side, and of course, I've transitioned over to the technology side. And I talk with small, large, all the way from born in the cloud, all the way to those that are making that shift. So a very wide range of scenarios. And about Checkpoint, you may or may not know. I know we do marketing. We do security by obscurity sometimes. But just to point out, what I'd like you to take away around this is we've got many years, right, of a proven track record of excellence. And again, a little bit more about Checkpoint in general. The big part about this is just the name in general, right? We've always been a software company first and foremost. As the industry has progressed from physical hardware to logical constructs and software-defined infrastructure, right? This has been nothing new for us. We feel at home. We know software cycles. We know software security. We know those challenges, and we've got a long history of delivering nothing but the best in class, right? When we talk about security, and regardless where your company is at today. In that transformation stage, right? We've been through not only with ourselves and our largest enterprise companies through that initial progression, all the way to today. And so if we look at this will probably be the only marketing in air quotes here slide that I have, but it is a slide that I do feel warrants exposure. As we move more and more and start to adopt cloud native solutions, right, that require seamless integrations, unintrusive security and visibility. This is where Checkpoint's Threat Cloud delivers. And there's a lot of threat repositories and threat clouds out there in the world today, right? But given our length of time, giving our added exposure and what our primary focus has been, regardless of AI and machine learning and what stock you put into that, it's only as good, right, as the data and longevity it has been exposed to, right? So two things to take away from this is anything that we're preventing and securing within your environment is going to be not only accurate and fast, but it's also going to be feeding and seeding our entire portfolio. So no matter which products you use or where you're at in that maturity level, right? From maybe a shift and lift, or maybe to a CI/CD process, right, where you're fully automated and really embracing the cloud today. Just know that is going to be the threat intelligence and threat correlation engine that's feeding and seeding our customers today and for the future. Now, regardless of where you're at, I think many of us can relate in some capacity, right? Some a little bit more than others, but like an example, we know and understand challenges with this transition. Cloud technical resources, cloud-ready applications, what makes sense, what doesn't, your ROI. We all know how it works on-prem, and we know, some of us know what that can look like in the public cloud. But here's the other part of that too, right? Not only are we adopting those innovations and those cloud native solutions, we also need to be able to secure, right, and do it agnostically, right, with operational ease. And then, of course, right, we want to rinse and repeat that. And I do. I talk with many customers, different scenarios, and we can all agree, right, that we're in full swing here. The progression is responsible for the speed, right, that we're dishing out some great, amazing solutions, some innovating products, right, and it's exciting. But nonetheless, right, it's with that speed comes a constant change in the landscape, and most of us are just barely scratching that surface. Both this is challenging and can be overwhelming. And so this is kind of a slide right here that I often kind of use for my discovery, but I want to give you a real world case scenario, and I'll call them Acme Corporation. And they sat in that first kind of section there, right? Very traditional. They were looking at shifting and lifting, very early stages, right? Starting out, just testing the waters, dependencies off hardware and lifecycle operations. They had some in-house development, but mostly it was commercial. They planned at least a year for this discovery and the staging kind of environment, right? And it looked good. They had a really good plan in place, and everything seemed to fit the bill. This was not an existing customer of ours, but we were brought to the table, and this was a great opportunity for us to showcase, our solutions, right? Some of the areas they wanted to really focus on is shifting and lifting, right? Legacy apps, SQL servers. They wanted to do data migration. They wanted to see what it looked like for data lakes and analytics, right? Their first stage was just basically building out this foundation, using consultants, using us, right? They wanted to get familiarity, much of like what we all go through in these initial stages. Well, the customer advised that they felt most comfortable using a firewall out in the public cloud. And I get it, right? There's solutions out there that have firewalls that I call them a firewall in the sky. Basically, it's a firewall image. It sits on compute, but it gives you that look and feel of what you're used to on-prem, right? And it can provide those guardrails, especially during these initial phases when you're starting to do the first set or that initial stage of progression, when you're trying to move your assets and your workloads and how they sit today into those public clouds, right? They had no immediate need for serverless. There was no Kubernetes at the time, right? So the solution that we recommended was our firewall in the sky, which of course is our Cloudguard appliance. It was put in place. It helped address a lot of the capabilities and unknowns that this customer was filling at the time, right? How do I keep track of all of these different machines out there that are going to have different IP addresses? We don't want to keep managing, IP address, subnets, any kind of VNets, VPCs, all those networks, right? So the Cloudguard solution is a family of products. And of course, it's all the way from the left side all the way to the right. And this stage here, right, was, as I mentioned before, is that Cloudguard network security, that firewall that sits on compute. And it is a good way to put some guardrails around that infrastructure, but also talk back to that on-prem, software-defined data center that you're using today, whether it's VMware or OpenStack or Hyper-V or ACI. It gives you that look and feel that you're most comfortable with, but allows you to manage it seamlessly through a single panel, making the operational efficiency very easy, right? And before I get back into this slide here, I do want to go ahead and showcase in real time, because I like to see real stuff rather than just some slideware here. But I want to showcase what that looks like just from kind of a management perspective, and what the power of just reaching into those other software-defined networks could look like, right? So this is a policy like you would see any other day, right? Within whatever firewall or security appliance you're using today, right? Access rules, source and destination. Our biggest difference, or one of the big things that we're known for, is going into those fabrics, right? Whether it's AWS, whether it's Azure, whether it's vCenter, whether it's NSX, whether it's ACI. But once we actually have what we call cloud data centers here, once we put our username and password, I'll just say credentials for simplicity's sakes, but once we create that connection to each of these environments, then we could go ahead and ingest all those different types of objects, regardless of where they sit, regardless of what IP addresses they have today, right? And as you can see, this is my AWS kind of lab environment here. But again, you can see the addresses, the subnet ranges, and really we're just going ahead, clicking, adding it into our policy, right? And then of course, layering in other controls as needed. And the cool part about this is about every 30 seconds that this management, that all of this kind of sits on, at least the brain power, is going into all of these different fabrics. About every 30 seconds, should I update an IP? Should I remove one? Should I delete it, right? So there's no operational handoff or no operational side that's involved from a traditional, or compared to the traditional side, right, where we got to update all this information. So that is a really close look at just some of the, I would say, maybe on the hybrid approach when we talk about shifting and lifting, or even just being able to manage both of those from here on out, right, to the future, which is certainly, doable and foreseeable with the many types of different infrastructures and different workloads that are out. What makes sense? And so when we look at just some of those areas, just in general, just to see what it looks like as far as like the private cloud, the public cloud, and adding those. It is. It's OpenStack. It could be OpenStack. It could be ACI. It could be a vCenter tag, an EPG, whatever the case may be in that underlying fabric. Just know that we'll go in. We'll go ahead and we'll create that connection. We will automatically ingest that metadata and those tags and those security groups and those VPCs and VNets. And then we'll provide not only a very dynamic rule base and a way to manage those policies, but we'll also enrich the logging capabilities, right? Because we all know how the native cloud side looks for logging. It's not always the best and easiest way to make sense out of some things very easy, but we'll normalize it, right? And we'll pull those information and those details in quite easily. Now, if I go back into my slides here, I'll go ahead and continue with my story here. But let's see, pop you right up there. All right, so as I mentioned, customer Acme, everything was going good for about 6 months. That's when things took a little bit of a turn. They were informed that they just acquired a new startup. The operational team came to several of the account team folks from our end, as well as the cloud provider side, and they had a challenge, right? The company that they were getting ready to acquire was a little bit more agile. They had 80% of their workloads that were already in the public space, right? They were using serverless, they were using Kubernetes, they were using containers. They were automating everything that they could, and they were just basically rinsing and repeating. This is how one customer, that I've dealt with went from that shift and lift scenario to what we have here today. Now, don't focus too much on the details here. It's not an exact replication, but it is a very good expected representation, right, of having a hybrid private cloud, public cloud, as well as ingesting, protecting, and securing, right, Kubernetes and serverless, right, on top of that, giving them the visibility, right, that's needed as they start to approach or start to shift more of the weight from the on-prem side or the, what I'll say, just infrastructure as a code side to more of the platform as a service, right? And when you start to let those reins go. And so they really needed to figure out, what's this Kubernetes mess? What's the serverless side look like? How can I protect it? And on top of that, the company that they acquired had a mandate to be CIS, compliant with that infrastructure. All the while, the operational team that I was tightly in communication with is trying to figure out what's CI/CD, right? That's nothing to nothing bad or nothing negative, right? On that side of the house, it's just a whole different world, right? They were completely kind of blown away. This is what we have to support. This is what we have to go ahead and try to figure out how we're going to be able to sleep easy at night. Well, so they came back to us. They had a few requirements. Of course, this looks way different than what was initially defined. And of course, the customer is definitely we've got all the folks that we needed in the right room, and it's helping connect the dots. But these were some of the main or mandatory requirements. They wanted to be able to utilize right admission control to lock down things. They wanted to be able to go ahead and ensure that what we had today, regardless of its compliance, whether it's infrastructure as a code scanning, whether it's image assurance, they wanted to ensure that our capabilities would also support and be native API ready. They would be integrated or be easily integrated with Jenkins and GitLab and Harbor, right? All of these different types of other CI tools and repository tools out there. And they did. They wanted more visibility around their Kubernetes side. As it so happens, this particular customer, the company they acquired, was a public cloud customer for their Kubernetes infrastructure, but they moved it back in-house to make their primary, right, part of a Tanzu workload infrastructure, right, with their NSXT environment. And this was great because this is an area that we actually, we have a solution for, and it's a very seamless solution. But they also wanted to use EKS and AKS, right? They had a lot of, primary workloads that were sitting in the public cloud, but more importantly, these were actually these were a secondary project and a secondary thought after their primary private cloud Kubernetes infrastructure was in place and things were doing what they needed to do, because they were building out a very new infrastructure based on some of the things that they learned out there. And so, and to add to that, right, they definitely, again, previous customer, they had no need for like image assurance or infrastructure as a code scanning, CV vulnerabilities. They got what those were, but they didn't know how to go about to integrate those in easily, and then allow operational and security teams, right, to be able to utilize a platform or a solution so that everybody gets a little bit of what they need. Well, that's when we introduced Cloudguard CSPM. So the first one I mentioned, of course, was Cloudguard Network Security, and it really is that kind of that firewall in the sky. Basically, an image that sits on compute and more or less gives you all those advanced controls you're used to on-prem, and it helps a lot of folks migrate, right, in a very comfortable and a very secure manner. But just as most of you are aware, as you start to progress from that heavy IaaS infrastructure and start to use or adopt more of the serverless side, right, and containers, right, more or less cloud native solutions out there, that's where CSPM comes into play, right? It's a SaaS-based solution for all intents and purposes, right? It's got about 4 different pillars or high bullet points that we really that I think we are a gold standard on. One of them is network security, continuous compliance, privileged identity protection, and threat intel. So network security side, that could be visibility, it can be inventory, it's a whole lot of other areas inside there. Continuous compliance, right? We deliver some pre-built rule sets, many more than a lot of the industry standards that are out there, but we allow folks to use these very quick and easy, right? From compliance to best practices in a very unintrusive, effortless way. And then when we talk about privileged identity protection, using maybe like I always say like a pseudo-like permissions, right, for the IAM world, basically giving users or folks the least amount of privileges needed to do what they need to do, and then of course you elevating their privileges, or they can elevate themselves, right, if you choose to give them that kind of control. And then cloud threat intelligence. I mentioned the threat cloud earlier. That threat cloud is hugely important with our solution. All of our solutions actually, but more importantly, as we start to move towards the cloud native side, it becomes that much more important, right? Because we definitely don't want to impact any of the innovative stuff that's going on, and we want to do so unintrusively. These are very quick slides here.
Hey, Alfred,
go ahead.
We've got about a minute left, so if you could start summarizing some key call to actions, that would be great.
Yes, no problem. So some key actions would be, no matter where you're at on that journey, whether it's going to be way on the left side and you've got things in a very automated, agile world, and you're looking to do runtime security, code scanning, CV vulnerabilities, and all of those areas, the Cloudguard portfolio has not only that support and solutions for that area, but it also supports those that are going to be the late adopters, right? Those that have large infrastructures that are slowly migrating things over. So regardless of where you sit on that timeline, when you start to progress into the public cloud side, just know that we not only have we been in business for a long time and doing this for a long time, but we've made some very good acquisitions that have helped kind of seal the deal on some of those cloud native areas. Just to progress what we need to give and deliver to our customers that are actually adopting and going there very quickly based on the last 2 years that we've had. So I'll go ahead and just sign off with, let me pop this guy back down. I'll sign off with the slide here, go towards the end here. Give you some eye candy. These will be made public, made to you. So if you want to learn more about Cloudguard, how we can help, checkpoint.com. I would strongly recommend if you go to resources.checkpoint.com, many different use cases, best practice examples, and they're free to use. We've got tons of those that have been not only developed by us, but a lot of our strategic and enterprise customers.